The police dog suddenly leapt onto the little girl's coffin and refused to move, growling, shaking, alerting like something inside was alive. But what did he sense beneath the sealed lid, and why were the officers terrified to open it? Before we begin, share where you're watching from in the comments, and when the story concludes, give it a rating from 0 to 10. Ready? Let's get started. The late April sky hung over Willow Creek Memorial Chapel like a heavy shroud, gray clouds pressing down on the small gathering below. Officers stood shoulder to shoulder in formation outside the chapel doors, their dress uniforms crisp despite the weight of grief carved into every face. Inside, the air felt thick and suffocating, as if the building itself mourned. At the front of the chapel sat a small white coffin, heartbreakingly tiny against the backdrop of stained glass windows. Lily Carter. Age 7. Gone too soon. Evan Carter occupied the front pew, his paramedic uniform traded for a wrinkled black suit. His eyes were vacant, staring at nothing and everything. He appeared hollow, a shell of the devoted father who had fought so hard to keep his daughter safe. His hands trembled in his lap as Pastor Graham's voice droned through the eulogy, words meant to comfort but landing like stones. The chapel doors opened with a muted creak. 2 officers entered, struggling to control the powerful Doberman between them. Ranger's muscles tense beneath his sleek black coat, his ears pinned back as a low whine escaped his throat. His paws scraped against the tile floor, resisting every step forward. "Easy, boy," Officer Martinez whispered, tightening his grip on the leash. "I know it's hard." But Ranger wouldn't settle. He paced in tight circles, pulling against both handlers, his dark eyes fixed on the coffin. The officers exchanged worried glances as the pastor continued, his voice rising to conclude the service. "And so we commit Lily's spirit to." Ranger's leash suddenly went slack. The Doberman exploded forward, a blur of muscle and determination. Gasps erupted throughout the chapel as he charged down the center aisle, his claws thundering against the floor. Officers lunged to intercept him, but Ranger was too fast, too focused. He reached the coffin and launched himself upward in one fluid motion, landing atop the white casket with a heavy thud. The small structure groaned under his weight. Ranger stretched himself across its length protectively, his body rigid and trembling. Then he growled, low, guttural, defensive. "Get him down," someone shouted. Officers from the K-9 unit rushed forward, hands reaching. Ranger's lips peeled back, exposing teeth that had never once been bared in aggression. The officers froze. "Ranger, down! Now!" Martinez commanded, his voice cracking. The dog didn't move. His stance shifted, paws planted wide, head lowered, muscles coiled. The growl deepened, vibrating through the chapel like a warning siren. Confusion rippled through the mourners. Some wept harder, believing the dog was overcome with grief. Others whispered nervously, uncertain whether to stay or flee. Evan remained motionless, his face a mask of devastation. At the back of the chapel, a figure stepped forward from the shadows. Daniel Holt cut an imposing silhouette in his leather jacket, military patches still visible on the worn fabric. His silver-gray beard framed a weathered face marked by countless deployments. He moved with purpose, his eyes locked on the Doberman. Holt's jaw tightened as recognition flashed across his features. He'd seen this posture before, in combat zones, in field hospitals, in moments when life balanced on a razor's edge. "Nobody touch that dog," Holt commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos with military precision. Every head turned toward him. He strode down the aisle, stopping just short of the coffin. His eyes met Ranger's, reading the rigid stance, the trembling muscles, the laser focus. This wasn't grief. This was something else entirely. "He's not grieving," Holt said, his words falling like hammer blows. "He's warning us." 3 years earlier, Lily Carter had been a bright-eyed 4-year-old with pigtails and a smile that could melt the hardest hearts. She'd sit in the precinct break room, coloring pictures of police cars and dogs while her father completed paperwork between emergency calls. The officers had watched her grow from a shy toddler into a compassionate second grader who knew everyone's names and left encouraging drawings on desks after difficult shifts. For Officer Martinez, one crayon masterpiece had read, depicting a stick-figure officer with an enormous heart. "You're brave." But Lily's childhood had been marked by more than innocence and kindness. Her extreme allergies, triggered by everything from pollen to certain foods, had plagued her since toddlerhood. Her airway was fragile, prone to sudden swelling that could turn critical within minutes. Evan Carter had learned to recognize the subtle signs, the slight wheeze, the way her fingers would flutter to her throat, the pallor that crept across her cheeks. After Evan's wife, Sarah, died in a highway crash when Lily was 3, the little girl became his entire world. He worked overtime shifts, picking up extra calls to afford specialist appointments and emergency medications. Exhaustion carved lines into his face, but his devotion never wavered. Then came Ranger. The Doberman had been rescued from a shelter 2 years ago, his military training records revealing specialized experience in medical detection. Something in the dog's intelligent eye spoke to Evan, a recognition of shared loss, perhaps, or the promise of protection he desperately needed for his daughter. The bond between Ranger and Lily formed instantly. The dog followed her like a shadow, his muscular frame positioned protectively between her and the world. Within weeks, Evan noticed something extraordinary. Ranger would alert him before Lily's oxygen levels dropped, pressing his nose against her chest and whining softly, giving Evan precious minutes to intervene. The Willow Creek Police Department quickly embraced both Ranger and Lily. Officers treated the little girl like a beloved niece, keeping spare snacks that accommodated her allergies and teaching her police codes during visits. Ranger became a fixture at the precinct, his calm demeanor and remarkable abilities earning respect from even the most seasoned veterans. "Ranger listens better than people," Lily had told Officer Chen one afternoon, her small hand buried in the dog's fur. "He knows when I'm scared before I even say anything." Now, as Ranger's growl echoed through the memorial chapel, those same officers who had loved Lily like family stood frozen, watching the dog refuse to accept what they all believed to be true. She was gone. Or was she? The spring months brought a creeping dread that settled over the Carter household like frost. Lily's allergy episodes, once predictable and manageable, began occurring with alarming frequency. Triggers that had never affected her before, a neighbor's laundry detergent, chalk dust from school, even certain fabrics, sent her into respiratory distress without warning. Ranger's vigilance intensified. The Doberman rarely left Lily's side, his alerts coming multiple times per day. Evan found himself sleeping in a chair beside her bed, one hand resting on Ranger's shoulder, waiting for the next crisis. The medical bills piled up like accusatory sentries on the kitchen counter. Insurance companies denied specialist treatments, citing experimental classifications and pre-existing conditions. Evan picked up double shifts, his face growing gaunt, his movements mechanical. He stopped eating regular meals, surviving on coffee and determination. One night in early May, Lily woke to use the bathroom and heard muffled sobs from downstairs. She crept to the staircase and peered through the railings. Her father sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, surrounded by rejection letters from insurance companies. Ranger pressed against his leg, offering silent comfort. Lily had retreated to bed without a word, but something shifted in her eyes after that night, a shadow of understanding too heavy for 7-year-old shoulders. The disaster came on a Thursday afternoon at Willow Creek Elementary's annual spring fair. Parents and children gathered on the sports field, enjoying carnival games and outdoor activities. Evan had been reluctant to attend, but Lily had pleaded, promising to stay close and alert him to any symptoms. She'd made it 20 minutes. Ranger's alert came first, a sharp bark that cut through the carnival music. Evan's head snapped up from across the field. The Doberman pressed his nose firmly against Lily's sternum, his body rigid with warning. Lily's hand flew to her throat. Her lips were already turning dusky. Evan ran, shoving through the crowd as Lily crumpled to the grass. Her airway was closing, oxygen levels plummeting with terrifying speed. His hands moved on autopilot, positioning her airway, administering her emergency medication, calling for backup. The ambulance arrived within 6 minutes. Barely enough time. Lily's vital signs fluctuated wildly during transport, stabilizing only after aggressive intervention. At Willow Creek Memorial Hospital, Dr. Avery Coleman strode into the emergency bay with the confidence of 2 decades in medicine. His silver hair and expensive watch spoke of success, but his eyes held something colder, impatience. "Another Carter episode," he muttered, reviewing the chart with barely a glance at Lily's pale form. "Let's get this sorted quickly." Dr. Mia Hartford, a second-year resident with sharp intelligence and sharper instincts, hovered nearby. "Dr. Coleman, I'd like to run extended neurological assessments." Her oxygen deprivation duration warrants. "Unnecessary," Coleman interrupted, not looking up. "Standard protocol is sufficient." Hartford's jaw tightened, but she stepped back. The tests Coleman ordered were cursory, surface-level scans that showed severe hypoxic damage but missed the subtle patterns beneath. After 40 minutes, he returned to where Evan sat slumped in the waiting area, Ranger pressed against his legs. "Mr. Carter," Coleman said, his tone professionally sympathetic but lacking warmth. "I'm sorry. The oxygen deprivation was too extensive. Irreversible hypoxia. There's nothing left to do." Evan stared at him, uncomprehending. "Nothing left?" She's still breathing." "The machines." "Artificial support only," Coleman said firmly. "I need you to understand, your daughter is gone. Prolonging this serves no purpose." The word shattered something fundamental in Evan's chest. 48 hours without sleep, months of financial desperation, and now this, the final, crushing blow. Dr. Hartford appeared at Coleman's shoulder, protest written across her features. "Dr. Coleman, if we could just." "Dr. Hartford, a word. Now." Coleman's voice carried warning. They stepped away, leaving Evan alone with forms and impossible decisions. Through his fog of exhaustion and grief, Evan signed the release. His hand shook so violently the signature was barely legible. Lily's funeral was scheduled for Saturday morning. 72 hours away. Willow Creek mourned as one. News of Lily Carter's death rippled through the small town like a stone cast into still water, each circle of grief expanding outward. The precinct became a makeshift memorial, photographs of Lily clutching crayons and hugging officers appearing on desks throughout the building. Flowers accumulated outside the station doors. Officers volunteered immediately to serve as honor guard. Chief Marla Donovan coordinated the arrangements personally, her normally steady voice cracking when she spoke Lily's name. The funeral would be a community affair, the daughter they'd all helped raise, now lost. But Ranger refused to accept it. The Doberman's behavior turned erratic the moment Lily's body arrived at Carter's funeral home. He stopped eating, turning away from food bowls with distracted whines. When Evan brought him to the funeral home for what the director called closure, Ranger launched himself toward the small white coffin in the viewing room, barking frantically until handlers dragged him away. "He's grieving," the funeral director said sympathetically. "Animals sometimes don't understand death." Evan nodded numbly, but doubt gnawed at the edges of his exhaustion. He knew Ranger. The dog had been trained to detect medical emergencies, to alert to physiological changes invisible to human senses. This wasn't grief. This was something else. Throughout the wake, Ranger lay pressed against the base of the coffin, his body tense and alert. Mourners stepped carefully around him, interpreting his vigil as devotion. But those who looked closely noticed the way his ears swiveled constantly, tracking something. The way his nostrils flared, processing information humans couldn't perceive. Strange behaviors emerged. Ranger growled at ventilation units, at air conditioning vents, at any source of circulating air near the coffin. He positioned himself repeatedly between the casket and the funeral home's cooling system, his stance protective and urgent. Evan watched it all through a fog of grief and guilt, unable to process what his exhausted mind refused to consider. Sergeant Daniel Holt arrived at the precinct on Friday afternoon. Chief Donovan had extended the invitation casually, an old military contact, someone who understood loss and might offer Evan solidarity. Holt had worked with military K-9 units for 15 years, specializing in medical detection dogs during combat deployments. He found Evan in the break room, staring at cold coffee while Ranger paced tight circles around his chair. "Evan Carter." Holt extended a weathered hand. "Daniel Holt. I'm sorry for your loss." Evan shook it mechanically. "Thank you for coming." Holt's attention shifted to Ranger. The Doberman paused mid-pace, meeting the sergeant's gaze with an intensity that made Holt's breath catch. He'd seen that look before, in field hospitals, in emergency triage situations, in moments when dogs detected what humans missed. "How long has he been acting like this?" Holt asked carefully. "Since?" Evan's voice broke. "Since we brought her home from the hospital." Holt crouched slowly, observing Ranger's posture, the rigid spine, the dilated pupils, the trembling muscles. This wasn't distress. This was active alerting behavior. The kind that saved lives. "Has he eaten?" "No." "Slept?" "Not that I've noticed." Holt straightened, his military training warring with the impossibility of what his instincts suggested. "Mr. Carter, I need you to tell me, what exactly was your daughter's diagnosis?" That night, Evan lay in Lily's empty bedroom, unable to face his own. Ranger scratched persistently at the door, whining with an urgency that bordered on desperation. When Evan finally opened it, the Doberman rushed inside, circling the room frantically, nose pressed to the carpet, searching. Searching for a scent that should have been fading. But wasn't. Evan watched his dog work, and for the first time since signing those terrible forms, a dangerous thought crystallized in his mind. What if Coleman was wrong? Chapter 5, The Coffin Twist, Climax 1. The church filled slowly, a procession of grief dressed in black. Officers occupied the front rows, their dress uniforms immaculate, their faces carved from stone. Chief Marla Donovan stood near the entrance, greeting mourners with quiet dignity while her eyes betrayed the depth of her sorrow. Evan Carter sat in the front pew, flanked by Martinez and Chen, who held him upright more than supported him. He'd stopped crying hours ago. There was nothing left inside him but hollow darkness. His hands trembled in his lap as Pastor Graham took position at the pulpit. Ranger stood beside Martinez, leash wrapped twice around the officer's wrist. The Doberman's entire body vibrated with tension, muscles coiled beneath his sleek coat. His eyes never left the small white coffin position before the altar, flanked by arrangements of white lilies and yellow roses, Lily's favorite colors. "We gather today," Pastor Graham began, his voice echoing through the sanctuary, "to celebrate the life of Lily Marie Carter, taken from us far too soon." Ranger's whine cut through the eulogy, low and urgent. Martinez tightened his grip. "Easy, boy." "I know." But Ranger's pacing intensified, his claws scraping against the stone floor. His breathing quickened, nostrils flaring as he processed invisible information. The whine built into something sharper, more insistent. Then he lunged. The leash tore from Martinez's grip with violent force. Ranger exploded down the center aisle, a blur of black muscle and desperate purpose. Screams erupted throughout the church as the Doberman launched himself onto the coffin, his weight making the structure groan. He positioned himself across its length, paws planted firmly on either side, and began barking, sharp, staccato bursts that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Not the mournful cries of a grieving animal, but the precise, urgent alerts of a dog detecting critical danger. "Get him off," the funeral director shouted, rushing forward. "This is completely inappropriate. Nobody touch that dog." Sergeant Daniel Holt's command stopped everyone mid-motion. He strode down the aisle with military precision, his weathered face set in grim determination. Mourners parted before him like water. Holt reached the coffin and dropped to one knee, studying Ranger's posture with expert eyes. The rigid stance. The trembling paws positioned over where a chest would be. The sharp, repetitive barks aimed downward, not outward. "He's detecting respiratory distress," Holt said, his voice carrying authority that silenced the chaos. "That dog is alerting to someone alive but struggling to breathe." The funeral director's face flushed crimson. "That's impossible. This is a sealed casket. The body has been prepared. We have protocols." "Your protocols missed something," Holt snapped. He turned to Chief Donovan, who stood frozen near the altar. "Chief, you need to open this coffin. Now." Evan surged to his feet, hope and terror warring across his features. "You can't be serious." "They said she was." Coleman said there was nothing. "Coleman might have been wrong," Holt said firmly. "That dog is doing exactly what he was trained to do. He's trying to save her life." Chief Donovan's hand moved to her radio, then stopped. The weight of the decision pressed down on everyone in the church, the impossibility of what Holt suggested versus the certainty in Ranger's behavior. The Doberman's barking reached a fever pitch, his alert signal unmistakable to anyone with military medical training. "Open it," Donovan commanded. The funeral director stepped back, hands raised in protest. "I cannot authorize. This violates every—" "I don't care," Donovan said, her voice steel. "Officers, open that casket." Martinez and Chen moved forward, hands shaking as they reached for the latches. The sanctuary fell into suffocating silence, broken only by Ranger's desperate alerts. The lid lifted. Gasps tore through the church. Someone screamed. Lily's chest rose, shallow, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. Her skin held warmth that shouldn't exist. Her lips, though pale, weren't the blue-gray of death. Evan's legs gave out. "Oh my God. Oh my God, she's—" "Call an ambulance." Holt roared. "Now." Ranger pressed his nose to Lily's sternum, whining softly now, his alert shifting to the gentle monitoring position Evan had seen 100 times before. The dog had been right all along. Lily Carter was alive. The ambulance screamed through Willow Creek streets, sirens wailing a desperate harmony. Inside, paramedics worked with frantic precision over Lily's small form, her vital signs dancing between critical and catastrophic. Evan crouched in the corner, his paramedic training warring with his father's terror, unable to do anything but watch. Ranger occupied the space beside the stretcher, his body pressed against the gurney's metal frame. When medics tried to move him, he growled, low and protective. They learned quickly to work around him. Oxygen saturation dropping, one paramedic called out. "She's decompensating." Ranger's bark cut through the chaos, sharp and insistent. His nose pressed firmly against Lily's chest, alerting to the drop before the monitors registered the full extent. He called it before the machine, the paramedic whispered, eyes wide. At Willow Creek Memorial Hospital, Dr. Avery Coleman stood in the emergency bay, his expression thunderous as the ambulance doors burst open. "What is the meaning of this? I signed off on." "Step aside, Dr. Coleman." Dr. Helena Voss materialized from the corridor, her white coat crisp and her authority absolute. As chief medical officer, her word carried weight that even Coleman's decades of seniority couldn't match. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who missed nothing. "Dr. Voss, this is highly irregular," Coleman began. So is declaring a living child dead, Voss interrupted coldly. She gestured to Dr. Mia Hartford, who hovered nearby with a tablet clutched to her chest. Dr. Hartford, run the full neurological panel I authorized. Advanced imaging, metabolic workup, everything you wanted to do 2 days ago. Hartford moved immediately, relief flooding her features. Coleman's face reddened. I followed standard protocols. The hypoxic damage was clearly misdiagnosed, Voss said. We'll discuss your protocols later. In my office. With the board present. The words landed like a gavel strike. Coleman's jaw worked silently before he turned and stalked from the emergency bay. Hartford worked through the night, her team running tests that should have been performed initially. The results emerged slowly, each one painting a clearer picture of catastrophic oversight. Reversible hypoxic stupor, Hartford explained to Evan and Chief Donovan in the early morning hours. It's rare, mimics brain death almost perfectly. Her metabolism slowed to near suspension, breathing became undetectable without advanced monitoring. And the swelling? Evan asked, his voice hoarse. Secondary airway inflammation created additional complications. It masked what little respiratory effort she was making. Hartford's expression darkened. Dr. Coleman's surface-level assessment missed all of it. If that dog hadn't alerted. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Mid-treatment, as Hartford's team worked to stabilize Lily's breathing, Ranger alerted again, a sharp bark that sent everyone scrambling. Monitors confirmed what the dog had sensed. Lily's oxygen levels were plummeting, a secondary collapse that would have been fatal without immediate intervention. His better than our equipment, one nurse muttered, watching Ranger with newfound reverence. By dawn, the decision was made. Lily needed specialized care beyond what Willow Creek could provide. A medical helicopter touched down on the hospital's roof as the sun broke over the horizon. Lily Carter, still unconscious but stable, was transferred carefully onto the aircraft bound for Seattle Children's Pediatric Respiratory Center. Ranger boarded with her, refusing to leave her side. And Evan Carter, for the first time in 72 hours, allowed himself to hope. The story exploded across news channels within hours. Police dog saves girl from her own funeral dominated headlines from Seattle to New York. Video footage captured outside the chapel, showing Ranger being loaded into the ambulance alongside Lily's stretcher, went viral, racking up millions of views before sunset. By Monday morning, the Washington State Medical Board had launched a formal investigation into Willow Creek Memorial Hospital and Dr. Avery Coleman specifically. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Rebecca Huang had worked as a surgical nurse at Willow Creek Memorial for 18 years. She'd watched Dr. Coleman's career with growing unease, observing patterns that others dismissed or ignored. When news of Lily Carter's near burial broke, something inside Huang snapped. She arrived at the State Medical Board's offices on Tuesday with a accordion file containing 6 years of documentation. I should have come forward sooner, Huang told investigators, her hands trembling as she spread incident reports across the conference table. But he was senior staff. Respected. Who would have believed me? The documents painted a damning portrait. 3 previous cases where Coleman had rushed diagnoses, dismissing concerns from junior staff. 2 patients who'd suffered complications after Coleman insisted on expedited declarations. 1 family who'd filed a complaint that disappeared into administrative limbo. He prioritized efficiency over accuracy, Huang explained, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Turnover times, bed availability, insurance processing, those were his metrics. Not patient outcomes. The investigation widened. Hospital administrators were subpoenaed. Coleman's medical records were seized. The State Attorney General's office began reviewing whether criminal negligence charges were warranted. At Willow Creek Police Department, officers struggled with a different kind of guilt. They trusted Coleman. They'd encouraged Evan to listen to the doctor's assessment, to accept the diagnosis, to let Lily go. "We almost buried her alive," Martina said quietly, sitting in the break room where Lily had once colored pictures. "We almost let that happen." Chief Donovan stood at the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "We trusted the system. The system failed." "Ranger didn't," Chen said, his voice thick. "That dog knew. The whole time, he knew." Evan Carter existed in a state of suspended animation, splitting his time between Lily's bedside at Seattle Children's Hospital and the small apartment he'd rented nearby. Sleep came in fragmented pieces, always interrupted by nightmares of white coffins and unheard warnings. But Ranger never left his post. The hospital had granted special permission for the Doberman to remain on the pediatric floor, an unprecedented decision influenced by his documented medical detection abilities. Ranger slept outside Lily's room each night, his body stretched across the threshold like a guardian sentinel. Nurses began relying on him. When Ranger alerted, a sharp whine, a specific positioning of his paws, they checked monitors immediately. Without fail, the dog detected changes 30 to 60 seconds before medical equipment registered them. Oxygen desaturation. Heart rate fluctuations. Respiratory pattern shifts. Ranger called them all. "He's not just a dog," Dr. Patricia Chen, Lily's attending physician, told Evan one evening. "He's the most sophisticated medical monitoring system I've ever encountered." Through the observation window, Evan watched his daughter, still unconscious, still fragile, but alive. Breathing. Fighting. Because a dog had refused to give up on her. Because Ranger had known something humans had missed. And somewhere in Seattle, Dr. Avery Coleman's carefully constructed career was collapsing, one revealed truth at a time. The progress came in whispers, so subtle that Evan feared he was imagining it. On day 4 at Seattle Children's Hospital, Lily's left index finger twitched when Dr. Patricia Chen tested reflexes. A small movement, barely perceptible, but present. On day 6, her eyelids fluttered during routine examinations, responding to light stimuli that had previously produced nothing. Cautiously optimistic, Dr. Chen said carefully, afraid to offer false hope. "Her brain is showing signs of recovery. The stupor is lifting." But it was Ranger who tracked the subtlest changes. When Lily's breathing pattern shifted slightly, the Doberman's ears would perk. When her fingers moved, movements too small for monitors to register, Ranger would press closer to the bed, whining softly. On day 9, everything changed. Evan had dozed off in the chair beside Lily's bed, exhaustion finally claiming him. Ranger lay with his head resting on the mattress edge, his dark eyes fixed on Lily's pale face with unwavering devotion. Then he felt it, the faintest pressure against his skull. Ranger lifted his head slowly. Lily's right hand had moved, her fingers stretching weakly toward where his head had been. The Doberman positioned himself carefully, pressing his broad forehead against her small palm. Her fingers curled. Barely. But unmistakably. Then her lips moved. The sound that emerged was barely audible, a raspy whisper shaped by a throat that hadn't spoken in over a week. "Hey, buddy." Evan's eyes snapped open. He lurched forward, nearly toppling the chair. "Lily? Lily, baby. Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, struggled, then opened halfway. Unfocused green eyes searched the room before settling on Ranger's face. "Ranger." The whisper was stronger this time. Her fingers pressed more firmly against his head. Evan's vision blurred as tears streamed down his face. He reached for the call button, his hand shaking so violently he could barely press it. "She's awake. She's awake." Staff flooded the room within seconds, nurses, doctors, specialists, all crowding around the bed with instruments and assessments. but Lily's attention remained locked on the Doberman who had refused to let her go. Ranger made a sound Evan had never heard before, a soft, keening whine that held no distress, only pure, overwhelming relief. The dog's eyes were wet, his entire body trembling. Dr. Chen stepped back, her professional composure cracking as she wiped her own eyes. "Welcome back, Lily." And in that moment, surrounded by beeping monitors and tearful celebration, Evan Carter understood the full measure of what Ranger had saved. Not just a life, but their entire future. 6 months after the funeral that never was, Lily Carter sat in the Willow Creek Community Center, surrounded by officers who had once mourned her. Her wheelchair was decorated with ribbons and drawings from classmates, her smile still tentative but growing stronger each day. Physical therapy had been grueling. Speech remained raspy, and her movements carried the careful deliberation of someone relearning their own body. But she was alive. She was here. And that was everything. On the stage, Governor Patricia Williams fastened the state medal of valor around Ranger's neck, a gleaming gold medallion that caught the afternoon light. The Doberman sat perfectly still, ears forward, as cameras flashed and the audience erupted in applause. Officers stood in formation along the walls, dress uniforms immaculate, tears streaming unashamedly down weathered faces. Chief Donovan saluted from the front row, her hand steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Ranger," the governor said, her voice carrying through the speakers, "represents the extraordinary bond between humans and animals, and the power of refusing to give up when all seems lost." Beside the stage, Evan Carter stood with Sergeant Daniel Holt, both men wearing suits instead of uniforms. Between them sat a presentation board outlining the Ranger Initiative, a comprehensive program developed over countless late-night planning sessions. The initiative had 2 primary goals: training shelter dogs for medical detection work, giving abandoned animals purpose while saving lives, and educating hospitals to recognize the subtle signs of reversible hypoxic states that traditional protocols might miss. 5 hospitals had already signed partnership agreements. A dozen sheltered dogs were beginning training. Dr. Mia Hartford had joined as medical director, bringing both expertise and the passion of someone who had witnessed the cost of oversight. Dr. Avery Coleman had been stripped of his medical license. The investigation had uncovered a pattern of negligence spanning nearly a decade. As the ceremony concluded, Lily wheeled herself to the refreshment table, Ranger walking pressed against her chair's side. His eyes never stopped scanning, monitoring, protecting. When she reached for a cookie, he shifted position slightly, not controlling, just present. Officer Martinez approached, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "How you feeling, kiddo?" Lily's smile widened. "Better. Ranger helps." The Doberman's tail wagged once, his gaze fixed on her face with devotion that transcended training. Sunlight streamed through the community center's tall windows, casting colored patterns across the floor, amber, blue, and rose, like stained glass refracting hope. The same light that had illuminated a church full of mourners now bathed a room celebrating resilience. Evan watched his daughter laugh at something Chief Donovan said, watched Ranger lean closer when her breathing shifted slightly, watched life continuing against impossible odds. Ranger never left her, not even when the world thought she was gone. And he never would. Did you enjoy this story? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one.